With throwing all your counters on the turn record track. In a game like this, they contain information on the turn record track, and oops, no forced marches. Now, overall, I would say my forced march caused me more damage than good. Although it went both ways, I forced marched out of the situation as well. I don't know, I did not look up that roll. I just, what is it, 22 French units can't do a forced march during the forced march phase of game turn 1. Well, again, you know, I don't think I gained that much out of the flanking attack that I managed. Who knows? But I lost a lot more off of the forced marches in and out of there and whatever, so we'll live. One thing I was thinking, even before I looked that up and have no idea, you know, hey, what's coming up this turn? You know, actually, there was nothing covering this except my game turn marker, so you'd think I would have noticed. So I'm more likely to screw up rolls than and have impact on that from that than some little change that's caused by like a later edition of the rules making a significant difference to how the game is played, unless I just totally misunderstand something because of it. But my guess is that the game, you know, as written back in 2013, was better than whatever I'm going to do to it accidentally. So not much thought there in terms of like, it's just not that big a deal that I may not be using the most modern rule set. Even though I check things when I'm bothered by them. So we're starting game turn 2 here, and in order to do the reinforcements I'm using, it's kind of nice. We have multiple ways of expressing everything. So they express the setup by unit, which if you sort things in the same way the designer chose to, by size, and then by like, so these are going to be all divisional units within a corps. These are all going to be independent division and brigade. Well, you might have brigade units in here too. Division and brigade units that all have counters that go on formations, but aren't tied to them. Then we have asset units, which are going to be regiments for the most part. Cav of all different sizes, artillery of all different sizes, and then somewhere in the back there's other stuff, which, yeah, I got my gripes about all that. But it allows you to organize everything and have it set up so that you can have things, you know, hey, I need this turn. I don't have to hunt things. I can do it through standard sorting. But then when you're looking up what comes in any given game turn, it's all spelled out in a separate place as well. So having it in both places is really helpful. I don't think I've seen another game do this in as effective a manner. I think it's really, you know, yes, there's extra lines. Everything that's here in the reinforcements is recopied into those charts, and that takes up some extra paper. But I do find that duplication tremendously helpful because you sort your units. Unless the units have, and some older games tended to have this, maybe some modern ones too that are simpler, whatever, have the game turn of entry written on the counter or something. But that's really like a piece of information that's totally useless except for setting up the reinforcements track, or, you know, the order that you're going to do it. Anyway, we got some crap coming in, and I gotta start sending it in. And this is this just the Allied reinforcements coming in at this point? Yeah. I ran into one of my problems early on in setup, which is, hey, I can look here and I can get all the pieces that went here, and that was the Epinal 71R. But then I wasn't looking, and I came up with extra units, and I'm like, oh, where did this one come in? And scanned through everything and found a 71R and put it on top without looking for that. But it shouldn't be there. It's all the way here on the back, the extra units list. Yeah, so these guys go in the bag of things that aren't going to be in play. Well, some of the reinforcements came in here under the First Army, kind of kicking around here, and one of them over here, which is just loose on the Alsace. I'm going to probably shift that over, maybe shift the army line over. I'm not sure. Or I can commit it over here, but I got a problem here, which is that I've got two corps. One of them's this new corps just came in, and new units that came in at the same time as it. Now, 1, 2, 3 divisions on the 7th Corps. That means basically this one reserve is going to be these units. I could shift those around. I get that chance during the attachment phase to sort of reorganize my forces everywhere. This is kind of a painful aspect of the game. Eventually you get kind of comfortable with what you have and what units you have devoted to doing what. At least that was the case in the Serbian one. It's a little more cluttered here, so it's going to be harder, I think. But there is one loose facet to it, which is that two corps can operate together in a combat here. So that changes things up quite a bit. Now, looking at the preliminary phase, repair all eligible fortresses. No, none of the French fortresses were hit. Repair eligible damaged roadway bridges. Well, these are behind my lines, so they all just get repaired. This is behind my lines, gets repaired. You can kind of see, hey, what was the big deal? and that's kind of the feeling. There's a fair amount of that in the system already of things. This is this is an earlier game than the Serbian one, but some of that's getting trimmed away, I think, as you go. So like these auto bridges, or it may just be there's a lot more bridges in the West than there are in the East. They don't give you the bridge advantage in the East, which, theoretically you should just be like, if it's behind your starting lines at the beginning of your turn, you can move through it. If it's not, you can't. There's a little bit of fuzziness to that, though, because, counter moves after enemies have broken your bridges and stuff. And that's all tracked by this. And I don't deny that, it would have effects. It means something. It's just, I feel like that's the level of detail that kind of makes the game a little bit more painful. I don't know how bad that part is. I'm much more bothered by some of the situations that go with the command things. Okay, so now the other thing is we hit this joint phase after that. I don't have any army base transfers hitting right now, I don't think. Gotta be careful with that, even though I don't have anybody to complain. So strategic plans haven't been achieved. You can't abandon the commands. But now comes, this is the thing I was kind of worried about. The attachment phase. This is for both, under joint preliminary. For both sides, all the things that are active on turn 2 become active now, which means I'm going to be spending a lot of time turning counters to face me and stuff like that. I knew this was a price, but I thought it would make it easier to start the game dealing with it that way. And I'll just remove those and start dealing with them as they come. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty damn clear the line here, everything north of there is frozen on turn 1. But then the question is, okay, yeah, but there's some units that are active on turn 2, but not on turn 3, and others that are, whatever. So it is something that, I feel I have to. Maybe it didn't help much on turn 1, but it's going to help more on turn 2 coming up because, I've got this 5th Army here that becomes active on turn 2, along with the Belgians. But The Belgians are pretty easy to see. The Fifth Army is sort of in its own little world, and I'll have to lay down delimiters for it. Figure out what actually belongs in it and do all kind of reorganization shit. Some of which I do on the fly as I start moving pieces, because I found that it's just too hard to do that thinking, to do all the organizational thinking here, figure out the supply, fine, all this other stuff, and then you start moving and you realize you fucked everything up with your pre-planning, and you got to redo it anyway. So I just found that like combining a lot of this stuff works better. Not that you'll have to pay attention to that abstraction that I'm taking with my actions, because I'm not going to go into that much detail. Okay, so I unflipped pretty much the entirety of the German army. There's a few units that aren't activated until turn 3, and there are a few that maybe aren't unflipped because I missed them. But I did run into something I don't understand. So the railhead is here. By the time the German turn comes, it's going to be up here, here or something, you know. Basically, these are so flexible that, yeah, you know, in the Serbian game, they don't handle the railheads, they abstract them away. And yeah, you can kind of misuse them. You can capture territory and draw and move your supply train into that captured territory and draw supply maybe a little further than you can in a few cases. But again, it's an edge case kind of thing, and I feel like tracking these is probably, it's a good idea to have dropped from the requirements. Now, in the Serbian game, it doesn't really matter because the rail connections aren't there. So again, dropping an annoying rule that serves no purpose, or almost none, in that game makes more sense than doing so in this one. So I don't know if the intention would be, hey, you know, this is maybe a little too much detail, just leave it and let the couple cases where like you get a little something out of capturing rail lines and then supplying your units in combat using them, which is not trivial to do. I mean, you really have to run your supply trains upright at the front for that to be possibly useful. And then, I don't know. It's really hard to figure out a way that it's useful, because honestly, the unit, if your supply train is at the front, it actually doesn't have to move very far. Like, it's going to keep the command in supply, right? So you got to be talking about linking up with some other unit that wouldn't be in supply but gets shifted over to that command or something. And yes, there are funky cases where that kind of thing can happen. And I could see that disturbing people, but I'm not sure it's worth all this tracking of the rail lines. I'm not sure I really care. But what I did notice was, okay, you know, this rail line's not established, but as soon as anything can move in this area, it has to be established. It's going to be shifted up there before the Germans move. So, in fact, you could argue it's shifted up there during the first turn because these units are actually here. The front line is actually up there. And I'm just throwing my hands in the air. I wouldn't have even considered too much how superfluous the entire rail net control is. This is not, you know, from what I can see, going to be like, I understand rail lines are incredibly important to the armies, but it's not like the North Africa campaign where you have, you know, this single rail line that could be cut. You have a fairly significant network, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's not a matter of the single rail line or not. It's really a matter of there are only these edge cases where it matters to track it to this degree. that I can see. Maybe I'm missing something. Wouldn't put it past me. All right. I don't know who the hell I was going to move. Looks like I was waiting on Second Army. I moved my tweezers. They're my indication. But then I decided, before I flip over the units up here that have to change, why don't I just get all the German reactive units, that are going to be affected by it? And then I just said, well, they're all turned to. Fuck it. All the Germans are turning over. If I was facing this, setting it up again, I would not have rotated all the German units. I don't know about the French units because, again, there's something kind of weird going on with them where Fifth Army is active at a time when the center is really not. And I don't know, having units rotated helps me distinguish when they're just indicated at the army level. So I've run into a problem with a rule I cannot comply with. The GDT sets up, it's inactive, but one of its units was active, so I moved that unit, and they have an attachment restriction. They can't be attached. During the first 5 turns, units attached to the GDT must maintain a line of contiguous zone of control from any hex adjacent to the English Channel to the zone of control of an allied unit attached to an army. I don't set up that way. In fact, this guy was back here or something. I'm moving him so he's a little closer, but basically I have to figure out some way of getting connected to, say, the Fifth Army or something. Now, maybe the Fifth Army can arrange this, but it's not possible during game turn 1. I'm not allowed to move any of those units. During game turn 2, it's not possible. I'm not allowed to move enough of them to establish zone of control from the channel to most of these units. I'll do my best to comply with this rule, but yeah, it's just not working. And it's kind of funny that I looked at that as sort of my first move. See, I've got it here, and now to here, it's that I can't reach that. Oh wait, the Dunkirk garrison is actually available to be moved. I am able to comply. How about that? And maybe I could have complied last turn by moving the Dunkirk garrison. So now I've got it down here. Maybe I can't move this garrison. To here, now I just have to connect the Fifth Army in. I wouldn't be allowed to do it during the first turn, but now during the second turn, I am capable of doing it because I can move an army into connection with it. It doesn't really feel like it's the GDT's goal. It feels like it's the Fifth Army's goal to make sure that the GDT can maintain their goal. I think that concludes my movement. I've got a few prepared attacks trying to punch holes through. I don't have any sort of I put the attack markers down for proposed attacks. I'll make a second check, but I mean, if I wanted to do an attack here, for example, it would have been a prepared attack, so certainly not going to happen now. The mountain's too tough to fight through, so my main goal is Mulhausen, try to break through, get these army goals. They're not going to help me win the game, but they free up my command without losing lots of victory points, so yeah, they seem like a good idea across the board. But again, I still deny that they're, foresight would not lead the French, who know they're going to be on the defensive, to launch an expensive attack using intensive combat to try to get terrain they're probably not going to be able to retain. The Belgians are kind of a tricky situation. I mean, look, they're the Belgians. They're not going to hold out, but it's hard for me to sort of internalize that, but I certainly want to delay the Germans as much as possible. I'm trying to create a line towards the front. If I fall back to Antwerp, I'm forced into the evacuation of the base and such not. The GDT not able to do anything to help defend Belgium because they're trying, well, first of all, they're immobile, but secondly, they're trying to maintain that line of communications. I'll be able to do that a little bit better by pulling into Belgium, though, so like I'll be able to make a tighter line. Plus, the BEF is due to come in next turn. But we got to do the German counter moves, and I just don't feel it in me to figure them out right yet. Okay, performed the counter moves, and this doesn't look good for the French. To begin with, yeah, I'm launching an attack into Belgium. Third Army is real close to its goal. If I want to risk my cav attacking it, I make that decision next move, whether or not I want to jump in there. It's pretty damn exposed, and I'll probably fall back because be set up for the French to smash into me right away. Of course, yeah, you have to be holding it at the moment when you hit the when you hit a joint preliminary phase. Which I just think that's too painful. I could have forced March to grab it, but I don't know that it's all that valuable. The freedom of movement doesn't seem all that important to me. Moving in this direction seems like what I want to do. So I'm leaving it there. I hope I don't regret it. I also threw down the army boundaries, which I don't know if I'm supposed to do it, when I'm supposed to do it, because these inactive armies didn't start with boundaries marked, but they kind of don't matter. And this will be probably pretty much what they are at the beginning of the German turn, but it helps me visualize what's going on, which is really the most valuable thing about them and these other counters, is being able to visualize stuff. In the Serbian game, a whole lot less important. Here, the visualization aspect is really, really key to being able to kind of see what's going on. And we got the French ones down already as well, though not for the inactive armies, because they start off without them, and I don't understand what that's supposed to mean. So why are the French in trouble? Well, they declared a couple of their prepared attacks, and the Germans were able to throw reinforcements into all of them. I forgot about the power of reserves in this game. But on the other hand, if the French don't try to make attacks, Plan 17 is just going to fail, and they're not going to make any ground. So I don't know what you can do. It's really hard to move your forces once they become engaged. And that's really the core flaw with Plan 17, is that the French numbers just aren't sufficient. If you look here, you can say, well, damn, those Germans are going to blast right through the Belgian army. Yeah, they are. And it's going to be hard to stop them elsewhere. The real difficulty is gaining ground against any kind of sustained defense. And you can say, wow, that sounds very World War I. Yeah, except the opening phases of the war, there's a lot of mobility. But why is that? Because there's no sustained defense in the north. There's nothing that can build that sort of, it's that solid line from Switzerland to the Verdun region that is going to be you can't bust through this, dude, but honestly, that's actually weaker than what you could generate for a defense using the mobile reserves. Putting 2 or 3 counters behind the lines in a line, and then kind of staggering them, leaving a space between those 3 counters. Say 3 seems more stable than 2 in this. With another line of 3 a little off, another line of 3 a little off, that's not going to be that contiguous line. And I don't really see the advantage to the contiguous line in terms of defense. it may end up meaning that the only way to really handle that is to create 2 hex units to hold that contiguous line and put reserves behind it. That way you can coordinate your reserves in greater density where they're actually needed. Of course, the problem there is there aren't little attack markers except for prepared attacks. So as long as the attacker is willing to forego that 1 column shift, they can kind of surprise you. And you put your defensive reserves in one place, and they go for a slightly less valuable location, in which case maybe the contiguous line is not that bad. The problem with it is, of course, the prepared attacks are an advantage, and if you are stretched out, then and don't have reserves, then they're useful. But here we're going to probably see some hurt thrown on the French. It feels a little weird given the name of the game, among other things, but also I would say some of what I feel like I'm getting out of the designer's philosophy is that the concept of continual advance isn't really being rewarded on a morale basis. Forces that do succeed in pushing that offensive action, well, they're going to degrade probably both sides, but assuming that they have the overwhelming numbers, etc., they're going to hurt the enemy morale. But their own morale is not given an opportunity to increase. So some of that may be somewhat directed by the idea of the victory points for locations that you have, in terms of reaching your army's goals, and when you abandon them, taking penalties, and la la la. Some of it comes from victory points again that are, locations that you're able to capture by pushing further. But the reality is that there is something to momentum, and it's not just that the enemy force is weakened. A fresh enemy force can come in, and that momentum can still carry your attack in a better manner than if you hadn't been having continuous successes. I find that kind of an odd thing not to reflect in this design for whatever reason. Again, it may be the name, it may be the fact that the designer actually talks about why this is an appropriate strategy. Well, maybe not why it's an appropriate strategy, but why it was seen as an appropriate strategy. And I think you do sort of see aspects of that in these early stages of the war, where maybe the attacker should be able to recover CEL losses a little bit more easily as long as they're gaining ground. I don't know how you'd word that entirely. It doesn't mean not having to reform, I don't think it does. I don't think it means that you just keep pressing on. I think it means you'd be able to slow your advance and take some recovery time, but maybe a little closer than the enemy. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure what the mechanisms would be to try to reflect that, because the CEL recovery is really what this is about. As I looked at the combat chart, I see something that kind of pleases me. I calculated my odds. I knew I had to use a calculator with the other game, and that's because it used these stupid half-column differences, odds ratios. So this would actually not go from 2 to 2.99, but actually go from 2.5 to 3.49 or whatever to 1. Okay. But what I'm left with is wondering is, geez, is it the same combat chart, just shifted? Was it shifted for balancing the attacks? Or was it shifted just because well, we don't want people to be able to figure odds easily. If it's the latter, I just say bullshit on that. I mean, it's like, I don't know what, I know that the OCS games do this with this mid-range one. And I'm like, I would really rather not have this, but I'm afraid to play with the combat charts to see. Whoops. So let me take a look at what the chart looks like. So 4-1, we're looking at the exact same results running down the chart. So all they did is shifted where the odds differentials are. Was that done again? Yeah, I find it hard to believe that there's a real desire for that shifting upward, but it makes attacking easier. And I am throwing my hands in the air wondering what were the intentions behind this kind of design shift, which I've always found to be such an annoyance as the person playing the game. It makes it harder to determine the odds. It doesn't really change the idea that there's like this bright cutoff, which is kind of the bogus argument that Dean Essig made about the OCS games. It's like, no, all it does is makes it more painful to calculate on that side. On the other hand, is there something fundamentally wrong with this chart? Right? Is it a little too harsh on the attacker? Well, screw it, I'm playing with this one. I like it better because it doesn't have those half odds. But we could see the attack stalled a little bit more easily than was ever intended, and that playtesting, the playtesting decision was to shift those over time. After so many games were played, they're like, well, attacking's a little too hard in this game. Okay, well, what's one thing we can do? We can shift the odds instead of trying to carefully tinker with the balances. I would have really rather seen that was a completely different chart, similar in structure, but reflecting those odds, the fact that they had shifted the odds up, down a little bit, actually. But that's not the case. Right? Yeah. Whatever. Well, the results of the French attacks were not as bad as I feared. Over here, we beat up that one poor unit that was still sticking around in the fight. That's the thing we were trying to hit. But I also discovered another attack I wanted to make and hit the garrison and drove it out of one of the hexes of Mulhausen. And you can see we're kind of turning the flank there, and the Germans are going to have to fall back from what position they're holding, which will give me a chance to complete my recovery there. He's going to be busy recovering for a while, though. Yeah, he's allowed to do that. He's not under orders. No plan. Over here, we had a real painful hit against, and I don't know what we were at. We were below 1-1, actually. I mean, we just got pounded, and this was an attack that you should never declare as a prepared attack when there's a reserve that's big enough to push in like that. I gotta be careful about stacking considerations. When I start counting the armies for the actual battle, I'm like, oh, I'm overstacked. That's not a problem. It's not illegal or anything. It's just, I think that I'm throwing more strength points in than I actually am. In terms of being able to actually fight with them. Here, we broke through and rolled a little bit of the front. And again, the Germans may have to give some ground there. We'll see. I don't see any other Allied attack or French attacks here. And in terms of German counterattacks, I mean, yeah, we won here. We don't want to go back at them. They're not that beat up, you know. It's and do we have? I don't think we have any kind of real advantage in trying to beat up on this unit. You know, we could fight it at probably about equal odds, but that's about it. Oh, these actually, no, these are both divisions. Yeah, that's the problem. I've got like 3 divisions in 1 hex. They can't all fight. And they were there defending. So I think the only German attack is the one I kind of pre-noted. Germans push ahead with a success there. Now it's Cav retirement. I'm gonna need Cav. These guys probably want to retire. They can move more cheaply and leave an enemy zone of control more cheaply. That's something I mentioned before. We don't play with the voluntary retirement rule, and I don't think there are any victory points to play with. I managed to avoid a couple of days of coffee, but that's about the extent of what I can do. After, I don't know, last time I feel like I gave it up for a couple of weeks. I'm on a lower quantity now, one that's more sane. Not drinking an entire pot, about a half pot. All right, so, and yeah, tons of weird shit happening, but whatever. So in playing the game, it's been a little hard to get to it, but the coffee addiction is part of that. Like, without, I don't know, somehow, at least for gaming these bigger things, I feel like I need coffee. Tea just doesn't do it anymore. And that's weird. I used to drink tea when I was gaming all the time. Coffee was more of a treat thing, but whatever. Life makes its changes in you. I've started the German movement, and so I went through the 7th and 6th Army. 7th Army moving up, trying to defend Multhausen a little bit more seriously. 6th Army filling in the gaps, trying to prevent the French from reaching their objectives. I don't know how much luck I'll have, but, you know, the French are about equal to me there. So at best. So I don't think they're going to really be able to break through very easily. It's hard to gain ground in this game when you have approximately equal force. And then I said, well, things get complicated here. Let's start over at the other end for the offensive side of things. And so we have the 1st Army launching a bunch of attacks. 2nd Army, probably not. I could make an attack on that fortress, but that sounds like a bad idea until I get some of the siege artillery up in place. Extended 3rd Army so that it included the GD. This is a little bit of bookkeeping trickery, basically, so that I could march up and take that with regular infantry, which seems like the best of my choices. Of course, that changes the frontage a little bit, whatever. And so now the 3rd Army is pushing heavier. It's gotten a little larger, though. It's gotten an extra unit. 2nd Army is a little smaller. That may end up causing me some pain. I mean, there's a certain amount of flexibility in shifting commands. Just not as much as you're used to in most games. Although, honestly, it's not all that different from, you know, something like OCS, where you have command headquarters group units and whatnot, and things kind of have to stay with their headquarters unit, and you can shift them. And I don't know how much is gained by this. It's a very detailed and labor and component intensive solution to the command and control issues that I don't really think buys you all that much. Then over here, getting ready to do the 4th Army, and yes, and then I realized I wanted to stop and say something and then forgot what it was. But what I think it was is we're really close to resolving all of these army goals. Like, they kind of cover probably the first few turns of the game. I mean, already. Look, we're almost at the first and second army for the German here. Third army is going to be achieved. Fourth army we're almost at, and there's nothing in the way. Fifth army has the special goal that, like, kind of, if I recall correctly, yeah, is kind of dependent on the fourth army. And sixth army has its own weird goal, which only comes into play when the second French army abandons its goals, or if the Germans get a random activation. Well, they will get an activation on turn 3 or 4, no matter what. And then I don't know what the hell their goal is. Sixth Army is going for a primary of Mano VR, 55-57. Do I have a counter there? Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah. But what we're expecting more or less is for the French to kind of either succeed in some of the goals, which are kind of easier, or to be abandoning their goals before they give up ground, because then they'll end up further away and have to pay a higher victory point cost. We do want to take away, this is 10 points. If we can hold that till turn 7, that's, you know, a big, big deal. I don't think we can. But likewise, freeing up, you know, one of the things the designer actually indicates is that he doesn't really completely accept that there was a really detailed Schlieffen plan. In the sense that the Germans were particularly bound by this hook around Paris, etc. And obviously, they weren't fully bound by it, but how much less could they be? You know, it's not like a detailed set of, well, once you achieve this army goal, then you have to achieve this one. I almost feel like an offensive action of this level without goals, though, is weird. It's like, yeah, you define the first couple turns of the game, and then you're just free. And I'd prefer to see something where the players, although this adds a burden to the player, have to select some goals, you know, and those goals help drive their army forward in that sort of way. Now, I think it should be a hidden goal. One of the things that I'm a little disturbed with this is, oh, look, I'm covering somewhere or another the French goal. Oh, here it is. So I've got an interest in this location, which is fine, but I can cover a French army goal and prevent them from reaching their goal, because they're not going to be free to act until after I've gotten a chance to move that far. So, you know, I can make them pay for the goals that they're pre-programmed on because I know where they're pre-programmed for. How much of such knowledge was in place? Yeah, I don't really buy it. You know, in a general sense, yes, I may know that I want to cover this area, that the French counterattack there would be an expected movement, etc. But the particular hex, and there being one hex that triggers this is good enough, yeah, that gets a little fuzzier to me, and I don't know how much I accept it. Anyway, needed a chance to chatter a little bit while I continue, moving everything along the front is an expensive act. It was expensive even in the Serbian game. I had to pause a third of the way, 2/3 of the way through, especially on work days when I could steal a little bit of time away, but maybe not as much as I wanted to, either during a break or before I started work. I found I just wasn't getting enough time, and this is going to be worse. I'm going to have to pause in the midst of movements or not take as many, I think. The bigger the game, the harder to squeeze. The thing is that with the larger games, not all of them, like Vietnam, for all the trouble that I had for it, is nicely positioned where you could walk away after a couple operations. The problem is that each operation required so much sort of analysis of the game state to decide what the best next operation is, that it's very hard to walk away and then acclimate yourself to the board again enough to be able to take an operation. And the act of doing so fatigued me so much. Here, I can move several of these armies in the time it took me to take an operation, to figure out which operation was the one I wanted to do, and which couple were the ones I maybe wanted to do. And then, and I'm not fatigued in the same sort of way. I throw a couple of counters down, I figure out where I'm going, whatever. It's all much, much simpler to cope with. But still, the time chunk required to take a turn is so much larger in this than it is in, the Serbian version of it that's a one mapper, or a less complicated game that has less pieces on the board, whatever. I remember being kind of like, oh, wow, it takes me about 20 minutes to do a 20-minute turn in Terrible Swift Sword. And that's at a certain point in, late in the first day, whatever. There's enough going on and you're realizing, wow, it's going to start taking an hour to do a 20-minute turn, whatever. Well, that kind of sucks, but whatever, But the bigger and bigger the amount of pieces, mainly the number of pieces you have to figure out to do something with, but also the amount of frontage, because, big stacks can be moved kind of easily in some cases, in some games. The more it becomes difficult to come up and actually do a full turn. And the question is, well, can you break it up? I think with this game I can, but with some games, that becomes more and more problematic. I think with the OCS, it's actually harder than it is with this. I'm not absolutely positive. I know with Burma, I was able to delineate portions of the front and deal with them, but I think that's a special case where there was some serious natural divisions in the board. There were multiple fronts on the board, basically. There's one solid front, but it doesn't feel too hard. There's not a lot of interlocking capabilities. I did this side, then I flung over here, and now I'm getting to the middle where it's kind of a little tougher. 4th and 5th Corps Army are going to be the hard guys. 5th Army especially, because that's where I kind of joined. But 5th Army on one side isn't doing much. On the other, they're going to be launching, I guess, forward to protect 4th Army's border or flank. I have a hard time finding the borders here. So yeah, the French border is way down here, and there's no French troops over there. Interesting. The coffee was a mistake, but it came up here to get a little bit more done and found a little somebody having a snack out in my yard. He and his mom were hanging out. I don't know if it's a he. It and its mom were hanging out under a brambles thing where I had one that I was afraid was sick earlier. Apparently, they've decided that's a good place to mellow out now. Oh, bye. All right. The French counter moves. They're launching attacks again, or at least planning to. Yeah. Being aggressive over there in the south. You know, trying to do what I can to get to these goals. I'm not that far from some of them, and if I can free up the units, that's great. Not take the big victory point penalty, but at least get as close as I can, you know. And I'm getting pretty damn close to some of these, so that's not bad. I think it's more or less assumed that you would. Oh, what else? Oh yeah, a little tricky thing down here. So another penalty to doing prepared attacks. The Germans set up prepared attacks here and here. Well, I don't know how terrible that is, but they had an attack planned here that's not prepared, and the French pulled away from that. They didn't have the movement points to do a prepared attack without like a forced march or something. Well, what ended up happening is the Belgians pull away, and now I've got like extra units where I could have done 2 attacks there and there. That might have been better. Who knows? Instead, I'm only getting 1 attack on that whole section. Of course, that's going to be a better attack than the 2 that I would have gotten. But, you know, not by that much. To another little weird thing, which is the combat chart. I conducted this attack. Drove those cav back. The combat chart on a 2 dark circle doesn't cause a step loss here. It does in the later editions. And maybe either, I doubt that the version 2 errata has that. I would guess that version 3 has that they incorporated the full chart or whatever. I don't know. I haven't looked and I'm not about to, because if the main game charts have changed significantly, that's going to be problematic in a lot of ways, and I don't want to open that can of worms at all. And again, you know, not sure what a step loss would do anyway. I mean, it would not flip this, and I think it would cause a replacement loss. I think that's it, because this is a divisional unit and it definitely cannot be destroyed in this game. Now I come to the conundrum of the game for me right now, which is, what the fuck is up with fortresses? I've read these rules. They don't make sense to me. I just hit this fortress, gave it a retreat result. So they don't take step losses, right? Somewhere or another it says that. Yeah, they don't take step losses in combat, only from bombardment. This only has 1 step, so whatever. When it's not stacked with a combat unit, okay. If it fails its CEL, it flips to its backside. I didn't check that. What happened was, I got a retreat result with the intense combat, whatever, and boom, it flips to its backside. That's what happens when it retreats. What the fuck does that mean? It no longer has any strength, but it still has a step. And what? I don't understand. Am I allowed to move into it? What's going on here? Is it destroyed? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like the only way these things can be destroyed is through bombardment, or maybe investiture. There's like, no, that's only units stacked with it. Only if the fortress step is destroyed. The fortress step can only be destroyed through combat. I don't know if I've just cleared the fortress and it's still there and I can't destroy it, or what. I cannot find anything that kind of explains how these fuckers work. And they're kind of the new thing in the game for me. one of the bigger things, and I've been glossing over that I don't get them for a while. It doesn't seem like the intention is that I've captured it and can advance in and destroy the fortification, but maybe I just don't fucking know. I really just don't know. If the garrison is gone and it's empty, you'd think that I could go in there and do something to it. And in fact, given that some of the fortifications were seized during the war and turned, and used as defensive positions by the attacker, it really seems odd to me. Like, what is this now? And I'm gonna have to try to figure it out some more, but I'm just really fucking lost on this. It is not at all clear from the rules. Maybe I was looking in sort of the wrong place. I am told that 12.5 contains something when I look in the thing. And nope, don't see it. Apparently there's some sort of, you can walk into a fortress hex and destroy it, maybe in a more modern set of rules than I'm using. I will look again to see what is present in the living rules, because I just looked it up and they're like, well, look at rule 12.5 something, and this is, here it is. Any fortress or is not adjacent to. Yeah, no. This was actually about how can the French destroy fortresses because they don't have bombardment capabilities. It strikes me that that fortress cannot go away, but maybe it doesn't serve a purpose, but is it blocking the rail line? What's up with it? There's just so many questions that are opened up by this that, yeah, I think I gotta look at the living rules and see if they make any damn better sense. It sounds like there's something. This is a pretty big rule, to tell you the truth. To just throw in the, oops, we seem to have left this out or something kind of thing. Definitely expected there would be errata that handles anything this big. Unlike other stuff that, like, well, probably doesn't affect the game much. The idea that you can destroy fortresses is a pretty big deal. The other thing is, and I did find that in there and put something here, in the finishing phase you basically have a 1 in 6 chance of destroying an enemy fortress if you're sitting on it with infantry and there's no friendly infantry near it. So there's an internal garrison, but it can't do anything. Now, that adds some additional questions, as like, maybe in these new rules, there's rules for walking into spaces with fortresses, because there don't seem to be here. They don't have a zone of control, but I mean, the assumption is you can't just enter enemy stuff, and sit on it. And I don't know what effect it has on the rail lines. Can I build rail lines around it? I just don't know any of this stuff. And would not be able to hunt it down using living rules. This is the kind of thing I have to be able to capture this kind of concept by reading a physical rulebook, which is why, the game that I bought that I don't have a physical rulebook for probably will never get played. Maybe if I print it out, but printing out 40, 60 pages of rules is, especially with my poor printer, it doesn't do a decent job, so I'd have to go someplace to do it. Anyhow, I think that's the end of the German attacks. I do actually have some opportunities. Like, the French are set up; they could make some attacks. Maybe I want to brush them back a little bit. But we did get that hex. That's great. I moved into it. There's some implied rule that I can walk into fortresses now. At least ones without a garrison. If they got a garrison on them, I guess not. And you can wipe out their... it's fairly easy to knock out their capability, especially with a weak fortress like that, to be able to defend themselves, to be able to not just be destroyed by being besieged. But whatever. Given that some of the French victory conditions involve taking things like Metz. Fortresses had better be able to be taken without cannons, but without the siege artillery. All right, let me look and see if there's anywhere else the Germans want to launch an attack, because I look like I have numerical superiority here, but that's perhaps deceiving. First of all, I'm spread out a little bit, but also you can still only throw 2 corps into a battle. So units that are dedicated to a corps, having 4 stacks, it might be possible I have 4 corps there. I can only use 2 of them to attack. So I'm probably looking at best 2-to-1 odds. And I guess we're done with turn 2 there. Germans got lucky with that fort, or fortress. They converted it to nothing. French attacks, yeah, in the Mulhausen sector, fine. That went great. Elsewhere, not so good. Wouldn't be terrible, except for the damn intensive attacks, which caused them additional losses each time. Definitely not a pleasant thing, and I can't wait to get rid of my requirement to make those. There are times, very, very seldom, when you actually want to do an intensive attack or maybe an intensive defense, just because the hex that you're going for is so important for whatever reason. But that ain't the case right now, and it is bloody and painful. It's just so likely that you're going to walk away with an extra step loss, and if you don't get anything, it's almost assured. So if you're going at kind of lower odds, you're almost assuredly not going to drive the enemy back, and some of these were not great attacks. But even when they were decent attacks, like on the 4-to-1 or whatever, they still just end up kind of this, maybe one or both of us take some CE losses, but for the most part, there's not much that happens usually. And yeah, it's just a painful, painful situation. All right. Maybe we'll try to squeeze another turn in, or at least part of one tonight. I got a lot of counters to flip still. A lot of these third rank things. And I penciled in the fortress surrender in here. Really glad to have a rules set that I can write on, not the fucking glossy shit they print nowadays. Okay, start of turn 3, everything's activated. Germans achieved Third Army success, so I'm free to do whatever I like with the Third Army, more or less. Whatever that may mean. I don't have to worry about goals anymore, and I can stop doing intensive attacks. Not that I've had to make any attacks, they just walked up there. For the French, the remainder of their armies, 3rd and 4th, the attachment, oh, I haven't gotten to them yet, whatever that is, have become activated. The BEF shows up. I don't know why that's not just inactivated, since basically the Germans can't get to them. So it would have made as much sense as like, hey, these guys are in movement, because the BEF obviously didn't just appear there. They had to train there or something. So, well, you know, in the same manner that units that are in motion are listed as inactive, they should have been considered the same way. Now, some of the inactive units, like the force up here, I think is mobilizing more than anything else. Well, completing their mobilization and preparing for action. So now we come to the attachment phase. Oh, 5th Army got a reasonable degree of reinforcements. Some others scattered around in other places. I've got them mainly associated with just loose as part of the army while I try to figure, but that means this turn is going to be kind of a complex one in terms of figuring out, hey, who do I want to associate with what? Because it really doesn't make a lot of sense to have units that are part of an army that's trying, especially if it's trying to attack. Defending's probably safe because 2 divisions, you're allowed to have 2 different corps in a single battle, so that's fine. But for attacking, you very much want to have things assigned to corps where you have any degree of force going on. We also had a combination unit, which was like 3 different, combination replacement, which is like 3 different units I had to hunt down. This could get really ugly as you go further and further with these combination units. Again, you know, it's just it's a painful device as far as I'm concerned, to be able to associate units. I got to check the rules on that. I just replaced one of the units. I took 3 of the units off. One of them I replaced it with, and I don't think that's how it's supposed to go. I think I've got to combine them. Now, they weren't allowed to move yet, though, so I couldn't, do anything to prepare for this. If it's the case, that unit basically won't be allowed to move this turn. Do have to combine them, so I don't remember where they came from. I think this is the unit. I'm gonna mark it with something to remind me. I don't know what. Let's put this over here just to remember that there's something weird going on with that. It's possible I might be able to shift a little bit this way. I won't be able to go that way. That's for sure. The units that, like one of the units came from here, so 2, 4, 6, 8. So I might be able to push a little forward in that direction, but not much. And that's not where the 5th Army is going, but the 5th Army is pretty big right now. On the other hand, I would have to be shifting a corps here, a corps there to do anything because 4th Army is also quite large. Not sure I want to keep the Army of Attachments. It's, again, not very big. I can deactivate it and throw it into the 3rd Army or whatever. It's kind of like just this extra command structure that I have that I can put on the board for the first few turns of the game until I have more armies on the board to begin with. And I'm not really sure what the use is for it. What's it commanding? Oh, it's commanding a bunch of reserves. Where are they? They're here. And then a Verdun garrison that I really don't care where it is. To a special an exemption I wasn't aware of. And this is the thing. There's a lot of little stuff like that. Cavalry could not have captured the army's objective. It had to be infantry. So I'm fine. I did it that way. But my discussions of, well, I could just throw my cav up there, didn't really comply with the reality of the game. Working my way forward. The Alsace trying to launch an attack here, finish off Mulhausen. That's worth a lot of points, but man, I don't know if I can get it. Because this is going to be able to reinforce in. With with the army strategic goals in hand, the detachment to army actually serves a significant purpose, which is I can maneuver around and kind of screen the front here, which I don't know if I would have been able to do as easily had I attached it to one of the armies. Probably because, again, the French goals are incredibly broad. Like, they have this huge span, like, of objectives. And not a lot of different objectives, just a lot of space along the front that allows you to slide things around pretty easily. However, I saw no reason to remove it at this point. It did make life a little easier. I've got a bunch of attacks planned here. Some of them committed to, quite a few committed to actually, where we're seeing the 4th Army making its push down. The Third Army getting very, very close to where it's got to go, and just trying to punch our way through with an exuberance of violence. Meanwhile, the BEF is trying to move up and take a place here. French Fifth Army and the Belgians are holding the front. I think this is allowable. I don't think I have to create some sliver, but if I had to, I guess I would create like a sliver here that's part of the BEF or something. I mean, they're trying to get to the front and take their position. The Belgians are falling back a little bit. Their position wasn't terribly solid. They can stretch out and gain a little bit more territory by falling back a little, but I'm trading space, and it's not like the Germans can't just move forward and keep pushing the attack. It's not like I become safe. If the Germans didn't have a reaction move for whatever reason, I would basically prevent the attacks, and it would come out kind of as a wash. But I am actually trading space away. All right, time for the German armies to make their counter moves. Something else. Cheating in favor of the Allies here. And I should have seen it here. Inferior Allied combat doctrine. Yeah, I don't know how much it's happened where the second die's result was a 1. It may have happened once or twice. But yeah, I've been forgetting to apply that. There's so many little special rules. It's a little tough to cope with here. So I don't know. What I was looking for was, I thought there was some kind of restriction that prevents the Fifth Army or any French from crossing over that deep into Belgium, but I don't see anything. And I'm covering counters now. That's no good. And I don't see anything under here. Yeah, that's not as easy as it looks. It's just, there's so much to try to keep in mind at any given point that we got this German advance into Lorraine that I got to pay attention to. Luneville 53. Let's see. Let me find those and see if I'm aiming for them at all. I mean, I need to get these goals out, but I also might want to trigger this victory point thing the same way the French are trying to get Mulhouse. Those are those additional goals. This one I'm going to get, and that's worth 3 points. But can I punch into any of these? That's a pretty good question. I've got until game turn 7 to do it, and I'm in no real hurry with this. I don't even know if I control it. It's kind of, the front line here is a little iffy, but that would be trivial, but these guys are not trivial, and I probably can't hold this. So I'm just going to leave those out there to help remember what's going on. I pushed my way through the counter move phase, and I'm pooped now. Pushing more reinforcements up towards Mulhausen. At the same time, trying to punch a hole where the French left things kind of weak over here. I guess that's First Army. But not able to do much because the dance of the cav doesn't work. So you can't do the dance of the cav offensively, right? What happens is you attack with the cav, and if you withdraw, if you gain the hex, it's great. You're fine. You're in perfect shape. But if you withdraw, you've spent 2 movement points, and then you're not capable of reinforcing without doing a forced march. Forced marches are painful. I don't like them. I try to avoid them for the most part because they might be, like, you're probably not saving yourself much for them. And what is this? Oh my. Someone I didn't notice. Did I want to move him somewhere? Let's send him off towards Verdun, I guess. Can't do any harm. Okay. Not really launching any attacks, although I might, depending on, do the French hurt themselves with their attacks, whatever, in the center over there, Fifth Army area. First Army making a big push against the Belgians. I'm undecided about hitting those forts. The easy way to destroy forts is to just flip them over and then sit on top of them, because apparently they have no defensive value at that point. They're just something to be demolitioned, basically, which kind of makes sense. If you can get rid of the majority of the garrison, it's not really able to come out and affect you, and then you can settle down to a siege type situation. So I understand how the rule operates. Just wasn't written that way in the version that they've printed for the game, as opposed to giving you online. And I got big grumps about the idea of living rolls. It's great when they come out with a new version of the game, I guess, to provide someone with an electronic version that can print it out if they want to, if they're capable of dealing with it on a tablet or something, whatever. But prior to that, when there is no printed version yet available, you really need the ability to say, here are what the changes are, pencil them into your paper, I mean, you need that no matter what. The electronic version can be useful just because it might be more helpful to some people than to others. But if it doesn't have the changes at least marked in it, it's problematic. It just really is, I mean, anyway, I'm just not sure whether or not I want to launch these attacks. I can get some pretty decent odds on the fort, and it doesn't seem like it's that bad a thing. So maybe I want to do that, try to blow my way through it. On the other hand, I have some artillery here, so let me put some markers there. I'm not committed yet. I kind of commit on a sector by sector basis, but that artillery I might want to blow off anyway. This is a fairly hefty fort when you compare it to, say, the Antwerp ones. It's not Verdun level, but it's Paris level. But yeah, the big forts in the front of the French are where I really, really am going to need that artillery, I think. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know, 11 doesn't seem like much, and then you flip it over and, oh, look, And it's like, I don't think it's a step loss. I think it's the fort is just destroyed if you succeed on that die roll. So, sure. There's also, it's not clear how you represent step losses. I've got these counters. I could use them, I guess. I don't think that's spelled out. They just say they take steps losses, and the step loss numbers happen to be ones that would fit with those counters, which are used for something else before, and then never anything specified later in the game. Of course, maybe it's in that living rule book, tells you what to do with all the stuff. Makes things, makes the game actually polished enough to be releasable, but whatever. I can fake it. But yeah, I need a break before I start rolling these combats. Bent over for too long. So for the French attacks, Mulhausen's captured. The points are, I put them on the board. They don't go until the end of the player turn, but that's fine. It's the player turn, so it's not going to get lost in a counterattack. I mean, the Germans could, but they really can't. Elsewhere, continuing that trade of casualties for ground. Yeah, I mean, when you're looking to get your goals, it actually makes sense. We got some ground gained over here. Failed down here. Whatever happened there was not pleasant. But everywhere else, we kind of, well, no, we made this stupid attack, which was not a good move at all. But yeah, elsewhere, we made some pushing, and you can kind of see we're gaining some ground. Can the Germans swing back and push them back just as well? Well, maybe not, but we can do defensive attacks that maybe, and we might see one here or something, that maybe further weaken the French army. Not so much in casualties, but in CE level. So that's kind of the thing to consider is, how much do you want to fire there in terms of CE level? So I'm going to throw a marker somewhere down here just to keep me in mind that I may want to launch an attack there. I don't want to make all my decisions. I like to make them sector by sector. I'm pretty sure that I'm not, well, see, I don't have density of troops up here. I have this thin line. That means I'll be fighting at like 1-to-1 or worse, and that's what went wrong with this other attack that I failed at, that the French made here, is that it was a 1-to-1 attack, basically, because defenses are almost as good as my offensive capability. Casualties, though, so CE level, eventually your army just sort of falters and stops being able to attack. It hits combat ineffective, demoralizations, whatever. It's just not able to keep fighting, or the units within it. The strength points are a little different because your capacity to fight actually goes down as you lose strength points. It's kind of weird, though. It's like they're both feel sort of, I don't know, not terribly important in terms of like, they're recoverable assets, and that's the thing that's kind of hard for me to take into mind. Why I don't like doing the intense combats is, oh, I don't want to get weaker, I don't want to lose strength points, steps, whatever, because I'm used to them not being able to be recovered. But they actually are recoverable in this game, and that's something that I gotta keep in mind, is that throwing men into the meat grinder is not necessarily a bad thing in the game. Our attacks didn't go so well. I mean, where we were really beating up on something great, but where we fought over here, we took some losses. Remember, we're going intense. And then attacking this was just an absolute mistake. Enough of one that I allowed myself not to attack this. I forgot a couple of things. First of all, these siege artillery aren't deployed yet. It takes a full move to deploy the siege artillery. So on the next German move, they can deploy, but they weren't able to do it on the counter move. Secondly, that's an IP, so double IP. So it's like, yeah, that destroyed, that took two levels off me, taking me down from like 5-to-1, which is really just 4-to-1. Would have been on 6-to-1 on the more modern combat chart. But it was, I got a bad die roll too, and it was just really painful at intensive combat. Yeah, not something I want to do again. I learned my lesson. I chose not to make the attack here. Here, this kind of fizzled. And that's probably all I'm doing tonight. I haven't flipped this yet, but I want to do it to remind me, but I get to see if there's any cav retreats that I want to take advantage of, which would be, well, German ones would be the most effective, because the French ones would mean that they can't react into a space defensively. The dance is basically, when you use cav defensively, you can pull it out of the zone of control so it's more mobile. Turning into the German side of the third game turn. And I'm looking at like 1 player turn per day is probably the average I'm going to be able to do here. Brought in reinforcements, and it does highlight something. I don't know where the hell it is, but I got a unit that just, here it is. The unit that just came in. So this is a brigade level unit that's an asset. You know, we didn't see this kind of weirdness in the Serbian game as far as I recall. But these were really confusing when I was setting up because I'm like, oh, brigade level units, great. You know, they always have a formation marker to go somewhere. Well, not all of them. It's not a clear division. It's not like what I had gotten used to was brigade level and above count as full formations. They'll have a separate counter to go with them. No, this one's just like a loose asset, which means I don't know what, you know. Not much, because as far as I can tell, nothing can get destroyed in this game unless it's isolated or something. So, you know, unable to retreat. Which again, I'm not sure I disagree with, but it also, I don't know, it feels like smaller units should be able to be destroyed, because the argument is about, well, no divisions were destroyed. Okay, well, that's fine, you know. And where you do see big formations taking real hits, it's over in something like Tannenberg, where, yeah. At some point or another, I got to pull units out. I don't know when that's going to happen. I got stuff that has to go to the East Front. Let's check here. Okay, 6th Army has some special rolls, 2662. Let's see what that is. I probably have to roll a die or something. That's what I recall it as. Okay. So the French are not going to abandon any of their plans. I intended to talk about that. I'm close in a couple of places, but why take the penalty if I think I might still be able to get to those locations? So, yeah, I'd like to be able to clear the army goal without taking a penalty, if I think it's still possible. So this is game turn 3. 1, 2, or 3 will activate the 6th Army's goal, whatever that is. And it should already be locked in on the board. All right, so 6th Army's goal is activated. I'm going to flip it over to help remind me of that. Honestly, that would be the easiest way to handle all of these. All of the ones that have active goals, I should just have flipped over. They don't look as pretty that way, but yeah, I'm aware of most of the others, and then this is my connection piece. All right, and I got to get to work. The markers down for the geographic objectives at the end of the game, whatever, at this point, because I still got too many armies that have goals, etc. It'll just confuse things. But I did want to look to see, hey, what's going up here? Because the French, you know, have made their push into Mulhausen. How much further do they want to go? Well, there's almost nothing. I'm looking at the numbers that are in that high value, and there's basically 2. One is this fort, and one is, I'm trying to remember what the other one is. 59.6. Oh, the other one's that's at all close is here. This mountain location here. That's all that's of value on this side of the board. I could give up everything. Don't know if that's wise, you know, flanking and whatever, but I'm under no real compulsion to try to defend much of this. I figured this fort's going to go, and it's only worth 4 victory points. at the end of the game. Obviously, if I could make a push in this direction in the south, that would be hugely valuable. If the Germans could gain ground down there, that is when the points start coming in. This is sort of the most valuable place I could be. But my army's scheduled to sweep this way. And that's why, if I had done sort of the reverse Schlieffen, which Legrand-Guerre has as an option, where you'd kind of actually invade Switzerland for whatever value that might have, you'd expect sort of a reverse of the situation here. I kind of wish the game had that option. Just, I don't know. I like the idea of there being multiple possible starting situations. I'd always play Schlieffen just because I'm an old fuddy-duddy, and I'm always curious to see how the historical works out more than anything else. And by the time I get back around to it, I'll have forgotten. Unless I saw some kind of, I really want to do this. But I would imagine attacking through Switzerland is really bad. Look at what's happening to the Second Army. At least this unit probably isn't going to get attacked. But I'm damn close to wishing I had canceled my planned orders already. And I may just have to do it. Because if this and this are cracked, now we're starting to see a pocket. In order to pull out of there, I'm getting further and further from my locations. And that may mean the First Army also will have to give up its attacks too. They look so damn close, but it's a tough trip to get through there. And Sixth Army has launched its attack. Wasn't able to do prepared attacks until now. I hope I haven't done any. And that should get me a capability to bust through. These are secondary goals up here, which, again, look, tons of room to maneuver around for those secondary goals, whereas my primary is kicking around under here. I think I've moved all the Germans I want to. Deploying my artillery, bunch of attacks up here in the north, a little bit of focus here, try to break the French offensives. That looks pretty promising, what you saw before. Fifth Army's in this weird sort of position. It has goals, but it doesn't have a primary objective. It's released, I guess, when the fourth is released, whatever that means. I think that's how it works. And for the most part, I'm using it just as a covering force, which isn't terribly easy because it's covering stuff back here. But by shifting this way, I'm able to fill in the line and get a little bit better defense into place. Again, I don't know if I've moved everything I want to. Germans falling back and trying to recover over here, and pretty much launching attacks everywhere else along the lines. On the counter move side, and I forgot to move these guys. On the counter move side, you got the BEF pushing its way in. I'm not so sure what's going on here. Like, fortresses kind of have garrisons that are part of a command, and that causes problems. I probably can slip something somewhere somehow. But the reality is I have to be able to get the BEF through somewhere. This is sort of in limbo right now. Let's just put it that way. Because I can't quite make sense of how to maintain the command lines there. But yeah, they're gonna take up their place between the Belgian and French armies. French 5th is it's not under any orders, so I'm able to kind of drift it around a little bit to try to improve my defenses. 3rd and 4th are under orders. I'm going to try to get a little closer here, but for the most part, I don't think I'm going to be making any attacks. We'll see. I might get some opportunity attack that comes out, you know, somewhere around here. I'll have to look and consider it as things develop after the German attacks. But and again, these are all the attack markers are just tentative. Like, yeah, I should pay attention to this more than anything else. Might be launching one there. I should probably put a marker there to remind me. But launching attacks over here, trying to get deeper in for the first and second army's goals as well. You know, it may be that I have to abandon the goals just one hex away or whatever and just take a 3-point penalty in each army. But that's a lot better. 2 hexes away is a 6-point penalty. It just, if you don't make it close, you're in a lot of hurt. If you can make it there, that's great. You know? But I'm kind of resigned to not being able to make it to really any of my goals, which probably is okay. I don't know. Fourth Army looks like it's got a lot of power, but I felt like I had a lot of power in other places too, and it just kind of dissipates after you start launching attacks. All right, gonna come back after. Yeah, I'm gonna take a break and then start doing the combats. They are a real backbreaker for me because I gotta stoop over a little bit. My tables are a little too low. They always are. There's good reason for that. I got a lot more reach the lower the table, but you know, for a small game I can sit on a chair when I start to hurt or whatever, but with this thing I gotta lean over all the time. Zooming in on something new for me in this series, which is the preliminary bombardment, or the fortress bombardment, which happens before the combat units actually attack. If I'm doing a prepared assault, which I can do, I'm going to need to declare it. Now the problem here is this fortified camp can build 1 level of fortification back no matter what, which to me kind of means I want to blow away the steps, I guess. I don't know. But I'm not sure I can attack anything if I knock all the steps away. So I do not know what can and can't happen here, but I'm trying to figure this out. So first of all the artillery that I have up there is 21 centimeter, which is not tracked. I can fire as much as that as I like. This thing gives me a -1 to the die roll on 1 artillery piece. So I'm going to be firing 3 shots on the bombardment table here against Class B fortresses, and there's really nothing else in play there. I could use a prep bomb, but I don't want to waste those. So on a 4 or less, I will be dropping that a level. What happens if I blow up all the steps to the exterior garrison unit? That's not clear. It's not clear at all. Yeah, you do use the step point numbers. Okay, so I think I get rid of the garrison if I blow it all up at once. There's no real advantage to attacking a partially damaged fortification. So at least I'll wipe out the garrison is the way I see it. So the black die will be the -1, and I'll just bombard that thing. This is going to be painful, time-wise. That's a 3. That is partial hit. This doesn't hit. I get 1 step and on a 1, 2, or 3, a second step. Okay, so I hit this for 2 steps. Which means I'll put one of these on there. And I have not wiped out the garrison. Now, wiping out the garrison is kind of important because then I can just walk in there on another turn and prevent it from being rebuilt, whatever, and then start wiping it out, I guess, more. But, yeah, it's going to take a while to blow my way through this, which is okay. I'm not in Antwerp yet, where maybe I would need it later. Trying to work my other guns up there. They're so slow. They're up here. I've been kind of heading them towards Verdun, but you know, maybe it's going to take me too long to reach Verdun, and I ought to be concentrating on other fortifications that are in the way. All right, well, that was less exciting than I thought, but I've done 2 out of the 3 hits to that thing, and I'll continue with my additional attacks. We basically, I mean, we're pushing the Belgians around, but not without losses. We are taking some heavy losses in some cases. I shouldn't be able to do this, but I'm dropping a prepared attack going into here as well. Unless the river's too nasty. How nasty is that river? That is, I don't know. I don't know what that is. It looks pretty big. It's the Meuse. So we have grand rivers. This might be a grand river. That would not be wise. Oh, it's only if all units attacking are attacking across the river, though. So yeah, so that would we'd take the hex side effect of the Grand River, which is the -3 to the attacker's strength, which I think we can afford. So we were at 50 something. Let me see. 29, 39, 40, 52. If I'm at -3 to the 1 stack, that keeps me above 48, which is important because that gets me on the 6 to 1 chart. This is what's nice here. So I'm prep attacking, or I'm prepared attacking, so I get a shift in my favor. I get 2 shifts against me for the entrenchments, but that puts me at 4 to 1. I think that's worth doing. It's just going to take me so fucking long to blast through Namur that I feel like I have to make attacks. That was relatively easy. I'm going to put a marker on there to remind me I've got to deal with that. You know, I had about the same kind of odds before busting into that one, and it came out really poorly, but it wasn't a prepared attack. This time it's a prepared attack. That makes up for some of the penalty, or maybe my odds weren't good or whatever. I don't know, but yeah. I don't think the Meuse counts as a grand river. I think it might be a great river. Again, this is hard to tell, but the Rhine is definitely a grand river. It's darker than what we're seeing here. Now here we're seeing something, and we're seeing something else that's lighter. So I think this is actually just a great river, which is important because it's 1 less shift and does less damage. But also F affects flank attacks. I don't know in what way. Probably don't have to outflank across it or something. In addition to what we saw before. Over here, straightened up, you know, pushed the French forward or back a little bit, but at cost. Over here, you can see we actually are beginning to surround and pocket them, and that's going to be really problematic. It's going to be hard to extricate themselves from that. The question is whether or not they want to launch an attack here. They're overstacked right now, by the way. Try to get that hex with an intensive attack. Maybe they can get it, save themselves some victory points, and then fall back out of there. Over here, we're getting cut off around the hills here, and that's dangerous too, because again, 6th Army is heading for this. These are of value if I can get to them, you know, within 7 turns or whatever. I'm going to hold off on the counterattacks because the attacks took a bit out of me, actually. The combat's beginning to get hefty. I'm enjoying this a lot more than I was the Serbian scenario for this system. Not in particular for this, not because of differences in the system. Although I do like the way the fortresses are playing out. It's taking me some time to get used to that more. But more just because, hey, there's lots of room and lots of opportunity for good attacks still. I'm sure that's going to change. It's going to become harder and harder to take hexes as things start solidifying, as improved positions start being dug, as solid lines start being formed, so you can't, you know, curve around and hit edges of things. But you know, where bulges happen, then you can fling them back, and that's kind of what we're seeing here with the German 6th Army, I guess, is flinging the 2nd back, which it's just an exciting little situation that's developing that I'm enjoying more than I think I was enjoying anything. Yeah, one of the things is the Serbian map is so small. And the areas where you're allowed to fight, basically, because of the way the rail nets work and everything, this gives me a lot more freedom of movement. Yes, there are rails I got to worry about, but not that much. At least so far, it's been pretty easy to keep within my supply lines without even really thinking about it. I hope. Maybe I've just been missing it. You don't see a lot of impact other than pushing forces about. It's not like the counter, you know, the supply of forces on the boards changes. It really doesn't for the most part. You get some counters under things like this. Yeah, that doesn't really show much. You get some counters under counters like this that shows that their strength is being reduced, but for the most part, you know, you're just really looking from the high level view, all you really get to see is that front line. Try to express why I don't like layering. Okay. So clear upland is this grayish terrain, and clear highland is this. I'm good with that. I'm trying to figure out this hex, which has this little top here, and I think it's Steep Mountain, and I think that's where I'm going to go. This looks gray like these. The next level up could be Clear Highland, could be Foothills. The next level up, though, if let's say it's the Clear Highland, is the Foothills, and then we go to Mountain. But here's the problem. I think this is the same color as this, and that looks like the highest stuff on the board. If we look here, let's take a look again. Clear Highland, Foothills. That Foothills is closer in color to this tan here, if that's the case. And then that would say mountains, Steep Mountain. Mountains, Steep Mountain. So I think there's like a layer missing here. Like this is not this. This is this, and things jump more steeply, and there's not like ridge lines like there are in the Serbian game to help distinguish what's going on. And it's just a real pain. Now, if it is steep mountains, I may not want to make this attack because I can't throw a lot of units in. I can get maybe like 3 to 1. Let's see, steep mountains, no, it's going to be worse than that. Steep mountains adds 4 to the defender's strength, so that goes up to 9, and I'm able to get, because of the river here, 14, 15 to 9, which means I get like a 3 to 2 attack. Now I have an Alpine unit, but I can't really get much more than that. Which might make it worth doing, just on the hopes. I don't know. I have to look, see what the Alpine unit can do. I don't remember what its capabilities are, and it's one of those little rules I gotta go find. And this is the irritating part, of course, is hunting down, you know, all the special case stuff. So those counterattacks did not go terribly well for the French, as can kind of be expected. However, in one case, they pushed adjacent. I definitely don't have the steam to try to keep going, but I got a lucky shot in there. Most of my shots were not that lucky, and I'm gonna almost certainly abandon, what is that, the Third Army goals. The question with the other armies is, hey, can I get closer? Second Army looks like it's in a lot of trouble. First Army looks like it's in a fair amount of trouble. Fourth Army, hey, I might be able to still get closer, but I think I'm going to abandon the goals for the first 3 armies when it comes around to that. But it's not that time yet. It's cavalry retirement, and I got some of that going on, and there's no victory points going on here. Of Allied cav pulling back, maybe more than I need to. Namur fell. Another lucky roll, whatever, which puts me in a much better shape, actually, for the Germans. And that's going to bring us to the interphase, which I guess I'll cover before I finish things up. See what happens in this first interphase. 3 French rail points. These rail points only operate for the duration of the next 3 turns. If I don't bother to use them, if I don't entrain 3 divisions or whatever, they just go away. It's representing the rail net continuously. Replacement points, nobody gets any. Improved positions, I guess both armies are going to get 2 improved positions available to them. And I don't know where to put these. I think that's all we do. I will check and make sure that there's nothing else. We don't have the interphase listed here. And if not, I won't be coming back, and that's the end of this first period. We have seen the French offensives largely ground to a halt. The Germans slowly making their way through Belgium. You know, it doesn't feel like any kind of lightning blitz going through here, and it shouldn't. You know, this is the dial, right? That's where the Brits have to make it. And it looks like the Germans are doing quite well, actually, over there. But the French grabbed Mulhausen fairly easily. A little stymied by this fort. A little worried here. Trying to figure out how to pull back and defend without taking too many penalties.